Welcome to the original Gangsters Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein. Very special edition. Alex Napoliello from NewJersey.com is joining us. He is the premier expert on the Pagans Motorcycle Club in New Jersey. He's been reporting on the Blue Wave for quite a while. We've been in conversations, talking to, behind the scenes with each other, comparing notes on our reporting now for over 5 years, probably.
Sounds about right.
And I am a huge fan of Alex's, and he's got a great expose out this week called The Return of Hellboy. We're going to get into that, and we're talking about the very, very infamous New Jersey pagan Robert Durandi, a.k.a. Hellboy, who has come back to the club as of last month. Alex, thank you for joining the OG Pod to discuss Pagans Nation and the Blue Wave in New Jersey.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. You're a legend in my mind, and
you humble me.
You're doing a really, really solid job reporting on the Pagans and all of organized crime. But you're definitely one of the guys leading the charge here for sure.
Well, you were at the forefront of a lot of this Blue Wave stuff. I'm always going to give credit where credit is due. I learn and I get a lot of my kind of launch point intelligence from people like yourself. And I know we were both kind of reporting on Conan Richter and his emergence in the club back in the late 2010s. Conan the Barbarian Richter from the Long Island chapter, who launched this Blue Wave. A big part of the logistical plan, strategically, was New Jersey. Can you kind of explain that, like why Conan, when he took over, named his vice president, Hugo Nieves Zorro, who's from New Jersey, a little bit more polished, educated. Can you talk about Conan naming him VP and then why New Jersey was such an integral part of his expansion campaign?
Yeah, sure. So just for some context, Hellboy coming back to the club is kind of a full circle moment for my reporting, because I really started talking to people in New Jersey, law enforcement sources. I was covering crime and courts for NJ.com, the Star Ledger, on a statewide basis. And the Hellboy case, where he beat Jeffrey Shank in the gas station near the Hells Angels clubhouse in Newark, was sort of my first look into the Pagans and where my reporting really took off. And it sort of coincided with Conan's Blue Wave initiative, and when that really started to ramp up in 2018, as we've reported, and there was a classified memo that law enforcement in New Jersey sent out from the New Jersey State Police to all the local law enforcement departments after the Hellboy attack on Shank, that put law enforcement on notice about what was going on with Conan, the Blue Wave, and how law enforcement on the statewide level was growing concerned about the violence that could potentially come from the Blue Wave initiative. And so New Jersey, to go back to sort of your question, the Pagans have long been an East Coast based group. Mm-hmm. And, you've talked a lot about the Philadelphia chapter. Obviously, Conan comes from the Long Island chapter, which is notorious. But New Jersey has always been a key to the Blue Wave expansion and sort of this putting this foothold down on the East Coast. Really, like, New Jersey has always been ripe for the taking, because there hasn't been a huge outlaw presence aside from the Pagans. The Hells Angels have territory here. They have the clubhouse in Newark. They now have a clubhouse in Trenton, but there's not an overwhelming amount of Hells Angels club members in the Garden State. And that goes for some of the other smaller outlaw clubs as well. There are some Mongols. There's a growing number of warlocks. I think there's some outlaws. There's been the Thunder Guard in North Jersey, which has always had a pretty solid presence here. But for the most part, it's always been pagan dominated. Zorro hails from South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. So as the Philly chapter grew in strength, so did the South Jersey chapters, the Atlantic City chapter. So New Jersey has always been a key part. And some of the most notorious legendary pagans, guys like Kano, come from New Jersey.
They had a president maybe 10, 15 years ago, James Coles, Jersey Jim Coles, was a national president from Jersey.
Yeah, and if you remember Glenn Turner, right. The notorious pagan who shot a New Jersey state trooper in the face and did prison time. After that case, I want to say it was in the 80s sometime, maybe late 80s, but I could be getting that wrong. After that happened, where he shot the cop, he became a legend in the pagan community. Actually, recently died within the past, I want to say 5 years or so.
I think it was about a year, 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, I know it was recent. And from law enforcement sources that I talked to who were at that funeral, it was one of the more well-attended funerals in Pagan Nation. Might have been a mandatory. I'm not exactly clear on that, but yeah. So there's these legendary guys that have come from Jersey that have roots here in the Garden State. So yeah. So when Conan wanted to expand, I mean, New Jersey had to be a key part of that expansion for sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Some of my sources were telling me that Conan and Zorro saw New Jersey almost like a testing ground.
Sure. Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, the Hellboy attack in Elizabeth at the Exxon gas station.
Newark.
Oh, it was in Newark? Yeah. Okay, I apologize. In Newark, I've been misreporting that. In Newark was in April of 18. Was very early on. Conan took over in late 17, early 18, and launches the Blue Wave, and the Durande gas station attack is kind of like the shot across the bow.
Yeah, and wherever Durande, Hellboy has always been a huge part of Conan's Blue Wave initiative.
Right.
Because he is a guy who is known to, for a lack of a better term, get the job done. Wherever Conan needed help, he could always count on Hellboy to sort of gather the troops and get the job done. And yeah, the Newark attack comes shortly after. Actually, according to my law enforcement sources who have boots on the ground, Hellboy was the one that Keith Richter tapped to sort of execute.
To kick it off.
Yeah, when they showed up at the Mailman event, which was a mandatory, and Keith Richter, that's the event that he wanted to take over the club by force. Durande was a huge part of that, and from what I've been told, the Mother Club members at the time sort of showed up, were kind of taken into custody and brought out of there, and then Keith Richter sort of took over from there, gave a very empowering speech to the Pagan Nation, to the rank and file who were at that event, and Hellboy was front and center there. Never a Mother Club guy, never never got to that level, but as Ken Croak reported in his book, wrote in his book, Riding with Evil, he was recruited to join, and this is going back to 2010. He, at the end of his case, where Ken Croak is the ATF agent that infiltrated the Long Island chapter, where Keith Richter's chapter while he was in prison. He was recruited. Croak was recruited to join this hit squad, this secret small group within the Pagans that were tasked to handle the dirtiest business of the Pagans, which in a lot of cases would be, taking out members of the rival clubs like the Hells Angels. And Hellboy was the guy that was was the leader of that group. And that's when Croak and Hellboy started getting close. So yeah, at pivotal times in the Pagans and when some of the most violent stuff happens, it's Hellboy who is a part of it and sort of leading the charge.
Yeah, I was told, and again, I please correct me if I'm wrong. I'll always defer to the boots on the ground reporters than the carpetbaggers like me reporting from out of the area. But I was told that Richter tapped Hellboy Durandi as kind of an unofficial sergeant at arms of the Blue Wave effort initially, and as his kind of chief enforcer in New Jersey, he was given the responsibility of leading that first phase of the Blue Wave in Jersey, trying to stomp off the Hells Angels, expand the brand in Jersey. Would you say that, is that jive with what you've heard?
So I don't know. I've never heard that he was sort of given like the assignment to handle that. But that news or what you're saying there would jive with just kind of, it wouldn't surprise me. So he was either the sergeant in arms of New Jersey or the president of presidents at that time.
He was he eventually became the boss of the Jersey region.
Yes, for sure. He was leading all the club's affairs in New Jersey at the time. So what I'm trying to say is it would make sense that Richter would tap him to sort of lead this effort in New Jersey. I don't know how much it goes beyond New Jersey.
No, I agree.
Grande, was involved with the Midwest and the West Coast.
No, I haven't heard that either. I just heard in terms of that first kind of that first assault, if you will, that first kind of push that Richter and Zorro empowered Hellboy Durandi. I want to ask one question about the launch of the Blue Wave, and then I want to bring it back because I think we kind of buried the lead a little bit on why Hellboy Durandi had to be brought back. Why is he returning? We haven't told people, what precipitated that return, and it was a physical altercation in 2022 with another esteemed Pagans member. We'll get into that in a second, but it was interesting. One thing you just said that I've heard about, and I've been planning on writing a little bit more about, that the kind of the launch of the Blue Wave coincided with their annual get together in Lancaster where they honor Mailman. I think Mailman's real name, I think, was Randy Rutherford.
Yeah, it sounds right. Rutherford's definitely his last name. Unsure about the first name.
Yeah. Richard Rutherford or Randy Rutherford. He was called, they called him Mailman, and he was a fatality in the Hellraisers Ball, which became the Hellraisers Brawl.
Sure.
Which was a Hell's Angel event in New York that was, the Pagans stormed in 01 or 02. It became a huge melee. Sonny Barger, the godfather of the Hells Angels, was present, and about 100 Pagans in vans showed up and went in there with baseball bats and knives and guns and
axe handles.
Yeah, it was a real
weapon of choice. Yeah,
it was a real dust up. Mailman was killed in it, and every year in Lancaster they hold a party, I believe, on the anniversary of Mailman's death, which is like a big to do with the club. Ironically, or coincidentally, I don't know if it would be irony or coincidence, that's where 3 years later,
Right.
that's where Richter is caught leaving and caught with a gun and pulled over after he leaves that party and ends up having to go to do 4 years in prison. He just recently came back. So is that what you heard, that as well as that he made a speech at that party and
at the initial party where
18,
he first took over?
Yeah, in 2018.
Yes, yeah, he gave a very boisterous speech that was very motivating to the rank and file. But yes, that's
February of 18.
Yeah, it was the winter because they weren't, from what I've been told, people don't ride to that event. It's and that's, you know, what Mother Club showed up in cars.
Right.
They're not showing up they're not riding their bikes there. Because it is a winter event. Yeah. But that's what I heard. And I just wanted to go back for a second about Hellboy and Durande, and one of your questions about, you know, did Keith Richter sort of tap him to lead the Blue Wave effort in New Jersey? From what I've been told, Durande is a very talkative guy. One of the guys, a guy that, like, if you got in a room with him, you would be able to talk like we're talking here, you know, not sort of, he's got Richter-esque qualities where he can get in front of a room, go to a biker event and galvanize the people that are in the room, sort of almost like a politician. So it would make sense that a guy like that could forge relationships with support clubs and get guys to patch over, because I could see where, based on what I've been told about him, he's almost could be like a good sales guy for the Pagans. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
He came in 2009 into the Pagans. He patched in. Do you know what club he had started with?
He was with the and I'm gonna probably botch the order, but it was two support clubs. It was the Night Riders and the Bandanas. I forget if the Night Riders came first, then the Bandanas. I think it was the Bandanas, then the Night Riders. And just to give a little context with that, so those were support clubs of the Pagans, and like, I'm not sure, you know, if you're not familiar with how the outlaw sort of culture goes, is when a support club starts gaining traction and getting bigger and getting more members, the guys at the bigger outlaw clubs like the Hells Angels and the Pagans sort of do these check-ins. They show up unannounced to events. They see how many members show up, because they want to keep an eye on, you know, where their possible threats are, for a lack of better word.
And their recruiting bases,
like and recruiting, right? Exactly. So going back to Hellboy and Durande, sort of this natural born leader, wherever he was prior to the Pagans, he was able to build strength in numbers. So when he was at the Bandanas, when he was at the Night Riders, he became presidents of those clubs or in positions of power. I don't know if he actually was president officially of those clubs. And he would grow the membership there. And that's when Kano, really the legendary pagan who was the Diamond, the chapter president of the Elizabeth chapter of the Pagans, which has always been a stronghold in New Jersey and North Jersey, close to Manhattan. Kano starts checking in on these clubs and gets to know Durande and gets to see front and center. So Kano starts checking in and sees front and center Durande's ability to command a room, and to grow membership, to forge relationships, and that became an attractive quality to the Pagans. And also, the guy could fight. I mean, Ken Croak talks about it in the book. He gives a bit of history about Durande. He was an MMA fighter in high school.
Very scrappy.
He's scrappy. I mean, if you look at him, he's built, very built.
Like a fire hydrant.
Yeah, he's and he could throw a punch. I mean, for sure. If you watch the video of him beating that guy Jeffrey Shank, I mean, it's sort of a jaw-dropping, video, and so yeah, he could fight. So this combination of being a good fighter, not being afraid of anyone, stepping up to anyone, and his ability to lead a room made him a perfect fit for the Pagans early on.
So end of 2022, this was right when Hellboy is coming out of prison from the Hells Angels attack.
Yeah.
He had done 3 years. He comes out, and shortly after he comes out, he's at a party in Toms River at the Toms River Clubhouse and gets into a physical altercation with a guy they call Broadway. Phil Ruick. Broadway Ruick was a numbers whiz. He was the treasurer for the club. Somebody who was known as kind of a logistical genius, ran a trucking company, was from New York City. That's how he got the nickname Broadway. And I don't know if he was stricken with cancer then. Eventually, he died recently of cancer. But back in 22, Durande knocked him out. Punched him. I don't know what. Do you know what the issue was?
I don't know exactly what the issue was. I don't know if this was like a feud that started was years in the making or what. But what I can say about that event is it was very well attended. And if you're going to punch the national vice president in the face in front of a whole contingent of pagans, there's no way you're not going to get booted out of the club. I mean, it was just, even though Durande's well liked, legendary, does time for the Pagans, as you mentioned, for the Hells Angels attack, very highly regarded. You do something like that, and it's just a recipe for disaster. I mean, instantaneous. His colors were removed that night. He's out bad, casted out bad, which means you're kicked out of the club in bad standing, and you're not allowed to come back. You're not allowed to show up at events, and that was sort of the end of it. And what many thought was the end of Hellboy, and what sort of precipitates the return is, as you mentioned, Broadway dies in December, and also what's sort of going on in Pagan Nation is interesting as well, because they're starting to face threats on the home front.
There's some restlessness in the ranks.
Yeah.
As Conan and Zorro's plan and campaign has paid a lot of dividends in terms of, if you're looking on paper and you're looking what's happened since 2018, even though Conan was gone for 4 years, he had put in some, interim bosses and acting bosses. And this is a group that's tripled in size in 7 years. They went from under 100 to now over 3,000. I'm told they're now in 49 of 50 states. They're the only state they're not in is Hawaii right now.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing reporting on your end. Yeah, I was not aware of that, and that's real interesting to hear.
And I actually got that from both somebody in the club as well as confirmed by law enforcement. And that part of the reason they were able to do this was reaffirming or making a formal alliance with the Mongols. I know they had an informal alliance, I think, back in the early 2000s, but formalized it and leveraged that connection to expand. Mongols, in turn, have leveraged some of the pagans standing in the eastern part of the country and have moved east as the pagans have moved west. Within this growth, there seems to be a small but formidable opposition faction that isn't thrilled with some of the direction of the club.
Yeah, and there's sort of a two-pronged part to this, right? So as you know, and a lot of your viewers probably know, outlaw beefs tensions transcend borders. So something that's going on between the warlocks and the Mongols in Florida can spill over here in New Jersey or elsewhere, right? So you have these tensions simmering between the Pagans and other clubs, as you've reported, but also clubs that the Pagans align with, like the Mongols, uh, are facing some threats from the Warlocks. You had that shootout not too long ago in Florida at the gas station between the Warlocks. And I should be clear, it's the Phoenix Warlocks, not the Harpy Warlocks, which I've been told they're all pretty much kind of done. But it's this Phoenix Warlocks. They come out of Florida. Florida is where they have their stronghold, and so tensions between the Warlocks and the Mongols in Florida. Now the Warlocks here in New Jersey are starting to expand, and I talk about this in my story on NJ.com. You have a guy Hinchman who's kind of been around in New Jersey and in the tri-state area, has been in other outlaw clubs. I think he was at
His name is Brett
Brett.
Hinchman.
Yeah, he goes by the nickname Big Rape, and
That's quite the nickname.
quite the nickname. Yeah, and he's growing the Warlocks here, and the Warlocks have always had a clubhouse in Paterson, New Jersey, which is a large city here in northern New Jersey, one of the largest cities in the state, next to Newark, Jersey City. You have a clubhouse here in Paterson. You've always had Warlocks in the northwest part of New Jersey, but now you're getting them in central Jersey, and there's a chapter in Mercer County, which is the Trentons in Mercer County, and now you have a Monmouth County chapter. And that is the issue here.
Right, because Monmouth has always been a huge pagan stronghold.
Yeah, and so you have the Monmouth and Ocean counties, sort of the central shore, Jersey Shore parts of the New Jersey, have always been pagan dominated. Hellboy built the Ocean County chapter. It was his chapter. The Toms River party was at a clubhouse that he helped build up. So Ocean and Monmouth is always pagan territory, and so for the Warlocks to come in and sort of try to plant a flag in Monmouth County at the same time. About a year ago, you had some local incidents involving some of the local law enforcement where guys and pagan members of the Ocean County chapter, one shot another in the face, and that became an issue with law enforcement, and a couple key guys in the Ocean County chapter got arrested. This is local authorities here in New Jersey. So there's interesting stuff going on in Monmouth and Ocean, and sort of, again, to bring it back to Durande, a guy who's got roots in this area of the state. One of the reasons he's gets brought in, or sort of as viewed as one of the reasons he gets brought in, is because, okay, we need to sort of cement our presence here in the Jersey Shore, the central part of the state again. Yeah. So
you have kind of two things happening at once. You have the internal and the external that starts to bubble. I would really say it started to bubble in 23. And then we're going to get to the actual order of operation and your reporting about how exactly Hellboy got brought back last month. But I've been able, or I shouldn't say been, I think I've been able to trace some of this internal unrest, because like I said, there's kind of two things at play. There's the Warlocks, Hells Angels, Outlaws, Blue Wave enemies, the guys that they're trying to go into their territory and expand, or prevent them from coming into Pagans territory and encroaching. And then you have this group of I want to be clear, they're small. This isn't a huge resistance, but it's made up of, from what I'm told, old timers, guys that have been in the club for 30, 40, 50 years. And there seems to be some tension over the expansion. I think everybody was in favor of expanding, but some people, from my reporting, weren't thrilled with some of the ways the expansion was being done, using the Mongols. I think there's some people that believe the Mongols have too much influence on what's going on in the Pagans. I think there were some old timers that don't like that the Pagans as an organization is getting darker, becoming more brown as opposed to just white. I think that plays a role. And then, so Conan leaves in the summer of 21. First, he puts in place as his as the president to replace him is Big Bob Francis out of Virginia. And Big Bob had a immaculate reputation, from what I heard. Was a guy that everybody loved, Big Bob. But Big Bob, I think, was part of this contingent that didn't love having to do business with the Mongols. He, from what I heard and what I've reported, he could not get along with the Mongols. That he was tasked with interfacing with Mongols leadership. Didn't go well, and as a result, he was taken out of that job, replaced by a guy from Pittsburgh, Tank Tenaglia, in the middle of Conan's prison sentence. I think that was kind of the first inclination that there were some internal problems that had to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Then fast forward to 2 years later, it's 2025. Conan is preparing to get out of prison after 4 years. And I think there are two things that have happened that I want to talk about and play into your reporting. So first, I'm told that Richter from prison is telling Zorro Nieves on the outside that he wants Conan, or Conan is telling Zorro he wants Hellboy back. Broadway died in December, and I'm told that Richter was pretty adamant that they bring Hellboy back. I've had one or two people speculate to me that it's a self-preservation thing, that Conan views Hellboy as the type of enforcer, the type of muscle he wants in front of him to prevent any enemies from within, or maybe from without, but definitely from within, of coming at him. And at the same time, Tank Tenaglia has to step back from the president's job because he's not in great health right now.
Yeah.
And they give it to a real OG, Clayton Ayers, who goes by the nickname Cletus, who's 81 years old. He's a Vietnam vet, former U.S. Marine. Last run-in with the law was about 25 years ago. And he represents the old guard. So it was kind of I'm told it was a concession that Conan and Zorro agreed to name Ayers the new day-to-day president. And possibly in response to that, Conan wants Hellboy back in the mix as well. This goes to, let's now talk about what you were able to report I kind of was able to get it out there that he came back. And you
Yeah.
were, I know you had it at the same time I had it, and your editor. I'm my own editor, so I
Yeah,
can
you got the
whatever I want. So I don't consider
just press publish and yeah.
I didn't skip
Hey,
you.
it was good. It was you were
We
ahead
both
of
had
it.
it. We both had it. I came out with the more macro, and then this week or in the last week, Alex came in with the more micro breakdown of how exactly he was brought back. Can you talk about that? There was a funeral that he kind of made his public return at.
Yeah. So I think this will sort of answer some of the questions you had and stuff you just mentioned there. So I had been hearing it was more speculation that Keith Richter getting out of prison would look to tap Durande to come back. This would all sort of come together once he got out of prison. That was more like speculation that I was hearing from guys who follow the club, mostly law enforcement guys. It was sort of like, it would make sense if he were to come back and try to take over the club, he would bring Hellboy back. What was unknown at the time was whether or not Hellboy was even interested in coming back. And then sort of, Keith Richter gets out, and at the same time, what's going on internally, and as you mentioned too, is there are some old timers, from what I've been told, some old timers in the Pagans that have not really, since the Blue Wave, since Keith Richter's expansion, have not really been too thrilled with how he's gone about that. Mostly about building the ranks, patching over guys, not having guys prospect, and having people pay for exorbitant amounts of money to get colors. This sort of thing, the criticism there has always been a couple things. One, this has allowed law enforcement to infiltrate the club a lot more easier, because when Ken Croak infiltrated the Pagans in the mid 2000s, he had to prospect and do some really grueling stuff as a prospect. He details it in the great book that him and Dave Wedge wrote together, what he had to do to get in. Now you have this like limited prospect period or zero prospect period. And so you have people that can come into the club easily, which many have believed led to law enforcement coming in. At the same time, you do have this building relationships with members of Thunder Guard and other clubs that have historically have non-white members. So you have,
and the Mongols are a California-based club,
right.
They were created. I mean, their entire existence traces back to being a response to the Hells Angels in California, who would not take Hispanics, Latinos. So that was the impetus for the Mongols to even be created. Was the Mongols have always had a very strong Latino influence, and like you said, I think with Conan, it's pretty clear that all he really cares about is growing the numbers. He doesn't really care, or doesn't appear that he cares about following the protocol that's always been there, and that would make the end game take longer. I mean, you wouldn't have been able to expand the way they expanded and triple the ranks and have flags planted all over the country 7 years later if it wasn't for, kind of having an express lane for people that can bypass some of the previous protocol and just jump on board quickly.
Yeah. And what law enforcement has always said pretty publicly too is that with Keith Richter and the Blue Wave expansion has, always that they've structured the Pagans now to run more like a business, more like what the Hells Angels do, and to capitalize on that fiscally and make money and
more like a mafia family, actually.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
they're not just thugs on wheels. There's a method to their madness.
Yeah, I do want to point out, because I think it's important, there have always been Hispanic members of the Pagans. Kano is Hispanic. Zorro, these guys, which are integral parts of the organization. But like, if you talk to old time, from what I've told, is like a guy like Kano, if you saw them, you wouldn't necessarily know what their nationality is. I mean, I've seen pictures of him from sources, from law enforcement sources. Yeah, very light skinned kind of complexion. So and at the same time, you have younger, and this sort of coincides with gang culture more broadly, not just pagans. But you have younger, more reckless guys coming into
It's the sons,
organized.
I call it the Sons of Anarchy effect.
Yeah, and that's what was going on with this Ocean County chapter here in New Jersey. You had young guys that were pulling out guns and just shooting each other. And what that does is that you get on law enforcement's radar very easily, and you will give law enforcement an opportunity to prosecute key members of the club for really petty, stupid stuff. I think with the Ocean County incident, the guy shot the other guy because he was like hitting on a girlfriend or looked at a girlfriend, or something to do with,
Were they both members, or was one a prospect?
So the guy that got shot was actually, I think he was out bad at the time. He was
out bad.
Okay, former member, yeah.
Okay, former member.
And from what I've been told, had some issues. I forget exactly with me, but I don't want to misspeak here, so I'm not going to say. But had issues, was out bad. So he was a former member. But these little internal squabbles are just give law enforcement a perfect opportunity to get guys off the street, get them in jail, prosecute cases that can put them away. And so this is happening, and there's sort of this this notion that the wheels are falling off here. And so bringing a guy, like, to bring it back to Hellboy, an old, like I say in my story, an old school, no nonsense pagan, a guy who can be seen as coming in, will sort of right the ship here with these younger guys being reckless. Also was a key motivation to bring in a guy like that back.
So if we go to less than a month ago, there is a funeral in Vineland, Vineland.
Yeah.
Vineland,
yeah.
New Jersey, and it's for a pagan, and this kind of plays into what we're talking about, that they called Slow Eddie LaFontaine.
LaFontaine, yeah.
His name sounds French, but in reality, he was Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican, yeah.
And
going back to the fact that there's always been
right,
yeah, Hispanic.
That's why I wanted to say that. Yeah. And his funeral got a lot of pagans from around the East Coast coming to pay their final respects, and the law enforcement's out there snapping photos, writing down license plate numbers.
I'm sure,
and they get a surprise.
Yeah, and Durande comes walking through the parking lot. It was described to me by law enforcement people and just other sources and stuff that, very like almost paparazzi moment here, where the lenses are flickering and people are sort of looking over at members of the pagans, are sort of whispering, like, who's look who's here type of thing. The eyes sort of go right to his attention as he walks on through. But yeah, it was his first public moment with the club. And it was at this funeral that was well attended for a long time, well respected, well-liked pagan who passed away recently. And it was sort of a big splash. And and now the thing is, it sort of leaves law enforcement sort of wondering, like, what comes next now. Okay, so Hellboy's bad, and really, I think this is why, both of us probably got the news. I don't know what in the order you got the news, but sort of I got the news around the same time that Hellboy's back and there's a new president.
Yeah, I got it at the same time.
And, independently, not like you and I talk about this stuff on the side and decide what we're going to lead about, but Hellboy is the lead, right?
Right.
And then you get down lower into the story about the new president. And I think the reason for that is because law enforcement is more concerned with a guy like Hellboy returning than what goes on at the top. Because the violence and the stuff that could sort of spill out on the streets here comes from a guy like Hellboy, right? I mean, we've seen it time and time again. Law enforcement saw it here. Although outlaw and other organized crime attacks mostly are targeted and meticulously planned, inevitably, there are times where members of the public could somehow get caught in the crossfire. I mean, that shootout between the Mongols and the Warlocks in Florida happens at a gas station where other people were. I mean, the videos I saw were shot from bystanders that were in the store crouching behind the aisles taking video. So, yeah, I mean, this kind of stuff, plays out in the public and could have repercussions. So I think that's why law enforcement is sort of on edge with Hellboy's return now.
So just talk about what you heard or what you reported about bringing him back. So Conan came out of prison on June 3rd. The funeral for Slow Eddie LaFontaine was on May 31st. A couple weeks before that, you're reporting that Zorro brings Durande to a meeting and gives him his colors back.
Yeah, so I don't have too much color on the actual meeting itself, and sort of what was said, and I'm not even sure.
But you placed it. I wasn't able to play. You placed it as the first kind of week of May. I wasn't able to get it.
Yeah, that's when I first started hearing about it. I'm not sure exactly where it took place, but it was some sort of a face-to-face meeting of some sort. Yeah, in that time frame. And Zorro, who is running things in New Jersey, and from what I'm told, running things in Florida for whatever reason, that's probably a whole other discussion.
I mean, he's the kind of the straw that stirs the drink in terms of boots on the ground, and has been, and he's the brains. And not to say that Conan's dumb, he's not, but
right.
But you bring a guy like Zorro into the picture because he's more polished and educated and can speak well and get the respect from, he's a bigger guy, but he doesn't necessarily represent like a scary biker.
He is, as you mentioned, well educated. I want to say, and I don't know if this is, I hope I don't misspeak here, but he has an engineering degree or was an engineer at one point.
I described him to somebody the other day that was asking me about him, and I made an analogy to The Wire. I said he's kind of like a Stringer Bell,
right?
A more learned, deliberate thinking. He's gonna have it all kind of mapped out in his brain before he says it. He's not somebody that shoots first and asks questions later. He's more of a low-key, mild-mannered guy, but he might be low-key and mild-mannered in the way he presents himself, but he's somebody that is making a lot of waves, pun intended, I guess. And this is kind of how I want to wrap up. I've heard that he has his own like crew within a crew, or his own, let's say, family within a family, or club within a club. They're called the Los Manos.
I think is it Malos? Los Malos?
Malos or Manos?
I think it's Los Malos.
Malos, okay.
I hope I'm right there.
No, I might have misheard it. Los Malos, and that they're loyal kind of to him, or the perception, I guess, from some of the naysayers is that this is a group of guys that are loyal to Zorro and Conan more so than they're loyal to the Pagans.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because Tank wore a Los Malos patch on his colors as well. But yeah, like I've always heard that like the Los Malos are very much Zorro's thing, and Zorro also going back to the stronghold in Philadelphia and South Jersey, the neighborhoods surrounding Philly and New Jersey. That's always been Zorro's territory. Like he brought a lot of support from South Jersey guys. And so yeah, he's behind the Los Malos. And I don't know if that's more of like become like a filthy few thing, like the Hells Angels, or you know how the Hells Angels have
Yeah.
the filthy few
Yeah.
guys that have, I think it's changed in meaning over the years, but guys who have basically stood up for the club.
Yeah. Guys that made their bones. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if the Los Malos is the equivalent of that in the Pagans. I've never really been able to get a full understanding of that, but I do know that Tank wore that patch. And I don't know if the new guy does too, but.
Well, that's just, these are all, a lot of moving parts. I'm sure that we are only a couple chapters in to the book that will be written about the Blue Wave and Conan Richter and the vision that he had and has been implementing, and the ripple effects of said vision and said implementation. Anything else that you want to share based on your reporting? Because you've done such an amazing job breaking this all down, and you were actually, to just go all the way back to Conan taking power in a bloodless coup. You were able to put some of that out in context 5 years ago ish, where Conan pushed out a guy from Harrisburg, Michael Trone, they called Terrible Tyrone, and Tank Tenaglia was his vice president, I believe.
That sounds right. Yeah, I think so.
And they were pushed to the wayside. Tank obviously came back, but Conan has been a tour de force, since he came out of prison from doing his time for the 1990s stuff, and now he is certainly putting his handprint on the North American 1% world, because right now, even if there's nothing more to write about Conan, if he, and I'm not wishing anything negative upon it, but if he dropped dead of a heart attack today, the legacy is huge. I mean, he's already he's already in these 7 years, he's put himself, if we're talking about, generational biker club leaders in American history, he's already put himself up there with Sonny from the Hells Angels, Taco from the Outlaws. Now it's Conan from the Pagans.
Yeah.
I mean, he's already made quite a reputation for himself. I guess just kind of finish off by any thoughts on Conan and what he's done so far and what you kind of see the future as.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of to tie it all together, the big what if, right? Because he's out of jail, he's on parole until 2028, right? So he can't have he can't be visibly seen at any pagan events, any pagan gatherings, because he'll just go right back to prison. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years in 2028 when he's off parole. Is he going to sort of just step right back in? Is he going to have to take the club over by force again? Is he just going to sort of retire and just keep the legendary status that he has and sort of, not be too involved? And, here back in New Jersey, it's, what's going to happen with Hellboy? Where is he going to send to, what's going to be next for him? And like, what's going to be the fallout too now, right? Hellboy's got a sort of a bullseye on his back in the sense that, he had a very public attack on an associate of the Hells Angels. I think it's important to mention that guy was not a member. He was a hang around. So the Angels going to try to come after him now? I mean, there's all sorts of questions that people are trying to figure out, basically what happens now. So it's going to be interesting to watch the story still being written. And we'll see.
Well, Alex, you always have a spot reserved to come and break down your reporting here at the Original Gangsters Podcast. You do an amazing job. I tell everybody, go get a subscription to NJ.com. I've been subscribed for a handful of years, and I really just subscribe for its crime reporting. And they still do. They do great crime reporting when it comes to the 1% world, when it comes to the mob, when it comes to drug dealers. They do some of the best crime reporting in the mainstream media that's left. Alex is one of the leaders of that charge, and we pay a debt to all the OGs, even if they're reporting OGs.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and likewise too. I mean, a subscription to your site is well worth the money. And I mean, you do an amazing job. I mean, guys like me, we report on stuff, what happens here locally in New Jersey, but you really capture the macro outlook on what's going on across the country and even overseas. Yeah,
so. It's quite the what I've created in the last couple of years. I still can't believe I've been able to do it, and it's no easy task. It's like a juggling act, and you just you got to feed the beast.
Your ability to go between worlds too is pretty fascinating. I mean, I primarily just do Pagans here and some other outlaw stuff, but to go from Pagans, outlaw to Cosa Nostra and Mafia, and
I'll tell you though, and just a quick aside, all of my 1% reporting in terms of like sourcing, it was all rooted in my LCN reporting. So my LCN guys that were some of my sources were my introduction to a lot of my 1% sources.
Yeah.
So like the Mafia guys vouched for me with the 1% guys, and it allowed me to gain access. I first started reporting just outlaws because that's the main Michigan group. And then I went a little bit into the Pagans. And then now over the last couple of years, don't ask me how, but I've gotten a lot of sources up in Montreal and Quebec, and I've become
your reporting there has been amazing.
And with the Hells Angels up there, people think people have said to me, "Oh, you're a Hells Angel." I'm like, no, I'm not a Hells Angel expert. I'm a Hells Angel in Canada expert. But if you're asking me about the Hells Angels in California, I can't really tell you. But there's the power in the Hells Angels right now is in Canada for the whole, around the globe.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how guys that were Italian mob guys helped me get a foothold in reporting for the 1% world. I was almost, this could be a whole podcast. I had a reality TV deal with a 1% club that fell apart the last second, but I was spending, this was over 10 years ago. And I was getting access to all the 1% clubs in Detroit based from this mob guy who was like the mobster, or the mob guy that did all the politicking with the biker clubs, and he could go into any club. And like his social club or his parties were the only time that groups representing different clubs could be in the same room. So his name was Frank the Bomb. And the Bomb took me around to all the clubhouses, introduced me to all the presidents. And that was just invaluable in terms of getting people to trust me. And then from, people trusting me within the outlaws, I was able to get into some pagan circles and then the Hells Angel circles. And now here we are.
One of the things that I'm sure, I don't know if you have any intel or inside information on this, but I'm always try to sort of the relationship between the Italian guys, the Italian mafia, and the outlaws, like the Pagans, like where is that? I don't know where that relationship stands. Back in the day, like with the Philly mob, like the guys were all they used to run with the Pagans, and the Pagans would do some dirty work for those guys, but I don't know how much that still happens anymore.
I've been told recently that part of the blue wave was reaffirming some of their relationships with East Coast mob families. I know the Philadelphia guys are still in close with the Philadelphia Pagans.
With Merlino and those guys?
Yeah,
Or
Merlino's guys.
Okay.
Are still very close to some of the Pagans. We didn't talk about Gorilla, but Gorilla Montevergine, who was one of the most, if not the most high-profile pagan of the 90s. He was out of the club, and then Conan brought him back in the late 2010s. And I think that helped a lot with the Philadelphia mob guys who love Gorilla and are very close to Gorilla. So that's played a role. And Joey Merlino, he's a force of nature, and he's somebody that is always on the move, always looking to politic. And I know that as he's had some issues within LCN in the last couple of years because of his podcasting and whatnot, he has reached out to bikers in multiple clubs to make sure that they have his back if anything goes wrong. And like, he's got Outlaws, Hells Angels, and Pagans. He's got Outlaws, Hells Angels, and Pagans kind of watching his back. So
interesting.
Well, Alex, thank you so much. I've taken more of your time than I wanted to. I appreciate you giving me an hour of your time on a Friday. Hope you have a great weekend. And please, whenever there's anything breaking in your neck of the woods, please jump back on and share with the audience. Nobody has their finger on the pulse of Pagans Nation on the East Coast more than Alex at NJ.com. So, Alex, just tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so NJ.com, I file stories for there as there's news that develops. On Twitter, Alex Napo NJ. And that's pretty much it. I don't have a huge social media presence. I'm a kind of old school.
I don't either. I need to have a bigger one. Well, thank you, Alex, so much. Thank you, Benny, my producer behind the glass, who got us up and running. We had a little bit of our takeoff was delayed a couple times because we couldn't get our tech in order, but Benny got it set for us. So, Alex, thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. Please like, share, and subscribe. Original Gangsters Podcast, Scott Burnstein, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. We'll see you guys next time.